What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things, and welcome to a new mini series here on the channel where I will be highlighting the Storyteller Overland GXV HILT. There is a chance that you guys have seen and heard some things about this new adventure vehicle over on my Instagram. I posted some photos at the initial launch of this vehicle, which was a few months back, and now I've finally got my hands on it, and my time, unfortunately, is going to be limited. I'm not sure how many videos will be in this series, but eventually Storyteller is going to call me and say, "Hey Talon, we need that truck back." I don't know when that's going to be, so I'm going to try to make my most out of my time spent with the new HILT. Now, that being said, this testing started a little over 24 hours ago when I picked this truck up. I've driven it for about 2 hours in total now. And when I picked the truck up, I was offered kind of an extensive overview of all of the features, what to look for, how to operate everything, which I politely declined. The reason for that is because I wanted to dive into this truck firsthand and really learn how to use all of the functionality of this truck, how to drive it. I wanted to dive in and really give you guys a first-person perspective of what it's like figuring out how to use a vehicle like this. Now, because this is a Storyteller Overland product, this is the newest vehicle in their lineup. They're using a lot of the same build characteristics and qualities, a lot of the same components that they use on their vans, like of course my own personal Storyteller van. So I figured it would be cool to just dive in headfirst without much of an overview from anyone at Storyteller. That way I can show you guys how simple a lot of the features are in this thing and how intuitive a vehicle like this is to use. Since my time with this truck is going to be limited, I'm going to try to do things as efficiently as possible. So for this first video, what we're going to be doing is a little bit of a walk around, really brief highlights of all of the features of the outside of the truck, the inside of the truck as well, of course. And then I also asked you guys over on Instagram what kind of questions you had about the Storyteller HILT, and we're going to sit down on the inside where it's nice and warm right now, and we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A with my 24 hours experience with this truck. If you guys are looking for anything in particular as far as questions go with this truck, I'm going to leave some video chapters down below so you can bounce around to the parts that you guys actually care about. And also, I'm going to use the comment section on the videos of this series as like an open discussion. So if you have any questions, some things that you want to see me do with the truck, I will try to accommodate whatever you guys put in the comments down below. So feel free to voice your opinion, ask me questions, let me know what you want to see me do with this truck while I have it. And now let's get into it, starting with the features of the outside of this truck. So let's start with the actual chassis of this truck. I'm just going to kind of run through a lot of the specs which you can find about the HILT over on Storyteller Overland's website. I'll leave a link for that in the description down below. For the chassis of the HILT, Storyteller opted to build these things onto the Ram 5500 chassis, which comes with a 6.7 liter diesel. Trucks like this are obviously built for towing and hauling around some pretty heavy gear. Mountain passes seem to be no problem. And of course, when you have a giant capsule on the back, I think they did a really good job at selecting the initial platform to build this first initial truck on. I should also mention that this truck is a prototype, so what you see in this video and my future videos of this truck, it may vary a little bit different from the final production, but These trucks are in production right now. Any feedback that I will give, some pros and cons to Storyteller, I'm hoping that they will take the feedback and actually implement some changes into the final product. But so far, everything has been great. Chassis wise, I was never a huge fan of Ram, but this thing is growing on me very quickly. Now, speaking of the actual capsule and the living portion of this thing, in the back we have a vacuum infused resin composite capsule with carbon fiber and Kevlar reinforcements. This thing is powered by a 16.8 kilowatt hour lithionic system, and it comes with two 3,000 watt inverters inside. The Ram chassis of this truck obviously puts a ton of power into the batteries. I believe it's pumping in like 6,000 watts at driving speeds, but also we have a ton of solar on top. 1,320 watts of solar to be exact, and there are two massive strips running down each side of the roof of this capsule. This is of course a 4-season recreational vehicle, so there is a lot of really nice insulation on there. They're currently using about a 2-inch thick closed cell acoustic and thermal insulation, which keep things really nice and quiet and also climate controlled at the same time. It's about 30 degrees right now where I'm at in Colorado. We're about 10,000 feet in elevation, and it is toasty warm inside at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, as we work our way towards the back of the capsule, they're using a proprietary zero torsion subframe here. Essentially what that means is that this entire capsule kind of floats on the subframe of the truck. You'll be able to see in some future videos when I'm taking this thing on some more trails that the chassis kind of stays in line with the suspension, which is absolutely incredible. We're going to talk about that a lot. So the chassis is staying planted to the ground, and it allows this capsule to kind of float around on the back of the truck. It's definitely a strange feeling to get used to because I have had no prior experience with an expedition vehicle like this, but so far it's been very easy to get used to. Now, speaking of that suspension, I think I might have to do a full dedicated video on this because they're using a hydraulic liquid spring suspension. This is essentially using a shock and reservoir setup which moves around liquid to adjust the suspension for different comfort settings as well as height adjustments. The way you see the Hilt sitting right now is currently on its highest setting, which I think obviously looks the coolest. We're up here in the mountains, so I wanted to have a little bit of ground clearance coming up here. It is calculating everything with ride height sensors on every wheel, and it's adjusting in real time. I think it's taking like 1,000 measurements per second, and it's going to adjust the suspension in real time depending on the terrain that you're going on, and of course the comfort. You can adjust between a comfort level, a normal setting, and a sport setting. Sport obviously will stiffen things up for highway driving, and you can really fine-tune how this vehicle performs. Again, we're going to dive into a lot more of the suspension in a future video. Now, up front here, we have a huge bumper with, of course, some really important accessories. KC highlights in this bumper, a 20,000 pound winch up front, as well as some very new, I believe this is the first time these KC highlights were used on a vehicle. We have massive pods up on the actual capsule right above the cab, so lighting is no issue when it comes to the Hilt. Now, moving back to some features on the actual side of the capsule here, we have a smart plug 30 amp 125 volt charger. This is going to be very similar to what you find on the Storyteller vans out there. We have massive storage compartments for whatever you may need. Really nicely sealed, so obviously the truck is muddy and dirty from bringing it up into the mountains, and you can store all kinds of recovery gear here. Right here is actually a hitch mounted receiver to use a winch to lower the rear tire. There's a full-size spare on the back, and that thing weighs 280 pounds, so you're gonna need a little bit of assistance taking that down, which is why they provide you with the tools you need to winch that thing down. Cassette toilet right here on the side that has a 4.75 gallon capacity, so about 5 gallons of black waste in there. You simply pop open this door, pull it out, and dump it into any kind of receptacle. You could even dump it into like your home toilet if you needed to. Back here we have a door for the fuel fill up. I believe this has a 52 gallon fuel tank, which is obviously huge, but you need something like that for a vehicle like this. More storage back here. This would be best to store hoses and things like that, because right here we have an outdoor shower, your city fill, winterization, all of your water controls, a water pump switch. So you could store a shower head in here, shower off outside. And then you have an access panel to a lot of the water controls here, as well as the gray water tank release. The Storyteller Hilt is coming with 120 gallons of fresh water. So that should last you, at least a single person, quite a long time. You could be off grid for a very long time. And then there is a 40-gallon gray tank in there, so you want to keep an eye on that. Obviously, if you're using your full capacity of water, you're going to need to empty the gray tank first. Then of course we have vents, more fills, more vents. Up there we have a vent for the bathroom on the inside, a wet bath this time, as opposed to the halo shower in the vans. And then in the very back here we have a complete pass-through gear storage. Plenty of room in here for storing whatever kind of gear that you take with you on your adventures. Now coming around to the back, you can see this massive spare tire that I was mentioning. We have Continentals. It comes out to, I believe, about a 41-inch tire. Great tire for off-road and basically a vehicle of this size. Military grade wheels on here. And of course we have a Invader style rack system on the back for mounting any other kind of accessories that you may need. Right here you get a good shot at all of the windows on this thing. They are of course using some Arctic Tern double pane windows, which helps with that insulation factor. And then up top we have the roof rails with a lot of lighting around the top as well. All of the lighting on this truck is wired to the factory auxiliary switches on the inside cabin of the truck. And you can also adjust those lights from the ModeCom system on the inside of the actual cabin. Now coming around to this side of the truck, we have the other side of the pass-through, which goes to the driver's side of the truck. More vents, more windows. We have a nice awning up there, which will come out with a button press of the inside. Lighting underneath the awning as well. We have more storage here for tools, more storage here. This is currently housing, oh, it's actually locked. I should mention that all of these compartments lock, but this is housing some of the chassis components. We have power outlets here. This is of course a 4-door truck, so you could seat up to about 5 adults in there relatively comfortably. We got running boards, big extended tow mirrors, that way you can see past the capsule. I mean, this thing is absolutely incredible. So when I pop open this door, the steps will automatically come down just like that. And let's head inside, warm up, and take a look at some of the interior features. Now coming over here to the inside of the Hilt, you are greeted with a very modern and kind of luxurious interior. Everything is nice and sleek in here. It's very clean looking, and I really appreciate the aesthetic design that went into this truck. Now as far as space goes, you guys are currently sitting on the kind of kitchen table in the U dinette, and I can come all the way back here. There's a ton of space. Now a lot of people are curious about the overall dimensions of this thing. So from the front bumper to the rear bumper, we're looking at 27 feet, which is about 3 feet longer than a 170 extended Sprinter van. Kind of puts it into perspective for you, but if you park this thing in a parking lot, you are going to need 2 parking spaces, obviously something that you can pull through. This truck is about 8 feet wide because of those fender flares on the outside and of course the box on the back. And with the adjustable suspension of this truck, I believe it sits on the low mode at about 11.6 and it can go all the way up to about 12 to 12.7. Depends on the options with like the AC, heater up there as well. It's really going to depend, but I can get some final measurements for you in a future video. With all of those dimensions, we're looking at about a 6'5" interior here. So even you tall guys out there will have no problem kind of feeling at home and living in this thing. I think the best way to show you guys the interior is going to be starting up towards the cab of the truck and then working our way back. Now up in the cab over section of this vehicle is where you'll find the bed. This is, I would say, roughly like a queen size bed with a lot of storage on each side with these little flip ups. We have 3 of those dual pane windows, all which open, and your headroom is a little bit limited here, so you can't really sit up in bed, but it makes up for it in a lot of other ways. You have really nice lighting all over here. You have some vent ducts which will bring the AC to you or the electric heat to you as well. You have that massive front window, which in the summertime would be great to open and kind of peek your head out of in the morning. And also that window will be great for stargazing at night as well. Last night was the first night that I spent in this truck, and the mattress was pretty dang comfortable. There may be a little bit of room for improvement there to make it a little more cush, maybe like memory foam or something in the future, but I slept great. It was violently windy last night, and speaking of last night, let me actually show you what we were doing. First night in the Storyteller GXV Hilt, and we're kind of getting a feel for all of this right now. Mike, of course, is out here with me, and we just used this little U dinette here for a podcast. So we recorded a podcast on my old podcast channel. I thought I might bring it back this year. Talked a lot about the truck and just like kind of life in general. So if you want to hear a little bit more thoughts on the truck and stuff, there's more of a long format piece of content there that you guys can check out. Now, I had this truck for 24 hours and took it home after an hour drive yesterday. Didn't put any gear in here at all. I just brought podcasting stuff, a toothbrush, and camera gear. So, luckily Mike brought some Peak Refuel. We're just doing like super lazy man dinner, even though we have this entire kitchen here. Dual induction cooktop, fridge, freezer, microwave.
We're filming like 3 podcasts or something tonight.
Yeah, we're just capturing all the content. So we're gonna boil up some water. This thing has a 3,000 watt inverter, and all that stuff is controlled on what is like the mode com, or the GXV com, I guess they would call it in this.
That's a nice screen.
It is a nice screen. I like how everything is kind of centrally located. You still have manual switches all throughout the cabin, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow. For now, tonight, I'm just kind of getting a lay of the land, so to speak, checking out what all these things do. We got a full bathroom here. Yeah, you guys are gonna see a lot more of this truck. Now let's talk about the control panel of this van. It's very similar to the mode com that you will find on the Storyteller vans, and you can control basically every element of the living space of this vehicle right here on this little panel. So under the home screen, you will see your freshwater levels and your gray water levels. You have controls for your water pump and your hot water heater as well. You have controls for your inverter. It will show your power flow, the battery pack temps, as well as the amount of charge remaining based on your current power draw. Moving over to climate, you of course have the source. So I was running the heater last night with the fuel, of course. It's using an S-bar system, very similar to the vans, and something that I'm very familiar with as well. You also have the electric functionality for this Coleman Mach system on the roof. That is an air conditioner and I believe heater combo. I have not used the electric heat in here yet, but I probably will test it out, just to test it out while I have the vehicle. And then you have a dual setting as well, which I guess would use both the fuel and the electric systems. You have your fan settings here, low through high, as well as an auto setting. Your different modes, eco and comfort. Eco is of course going to conserve more power, whereas comfort is going to use more power but regulate the temperature a little bit more aggressively. And then the Magic Climate. What the Magic Climate does is the same as the Storyteller vans. Essentially, if I'm traveling around in the desert and I have my temperature set to 65 on the interior, if it's hot outside, it's going to cool down the interior to 65. If the Magic Climate is on and it is still set to 65, I come up into the mountains and it's cold, it's going to then heat the inside of the vehicle up to 65. You have your vent controls, your AC controls, your heating controls here, and then the lighting controls. This is probably one of my favorite things that I've experienced with the Hilt so far. You have 6 different preset settings and you can control the intensity of the light, so you can dim them all the way down. Let's actually do that now. We'll take all of these lights down and then we can crank them back up. You can control each individual light setting individually. There's a lot of preset buttons throughout the living portion of this. So back in the bed area, there are 2 buttons for the preset 2. So I came in here, changed the preset 2 to be kind of like a nighttime mode. So we have the puck lights above the bed illuminated, and then I have the floor light illuminated as well, because kind of want to have some really low dim kind of mood lighting. The different preset buttons can be found all throughout this cabin, and you can set the individual presets by clicking edit preset. So for number 2, you can control awning lights, cabin lights, entry lights, reading lights, upper accent lights, the dining lights, loft lights, and the lower accent lights as well. For the presets, you can have them on or off, and you can control how bright they actually are. Once you find your settings, you click save, and I think I'm going to dive into those settings a little bit more as I'm using the Hilt a little bit more. Now, right at the entryway here, you have a lot of those controls that I'm talking about. You have a fire extinguisher as well. One thing that I haven't even mentioned is that the HILT is RVIA certified, which essentially means you can find a HILT at a dealer, you can finance it on a long-term loan just like an RV, and it makes getting into a vehicle like this a heck of a lot easier than a lot of the kind of competing brands out there. We can talk more about that in a future video. So here we have a window on the door, a little bit of storage cubbies down there, and we have blackout shades on all of these windows. So you pull them up for the blackout shade on this one. On all of the other windows, you're going to pull up for the bug screens, and then you can detach them to put them down to open the awning style windows. And of course, you can reconnect the bug screen and pull the blackout shade down if you want it to be pitch black in here. Now, to get up into the bed, you have a stowaway ladder here, which kind of latches in with magnets. You simply pull this out till it clicks, and then it lowers down. Really nice and simple way to get up into the bed. We have some padding here to make it nice and comfortable as well. When you're not up in the bed, simply stow that thing away, and it's nice and solid with the magnet there. We have a cab pass-through, which is pretty dang cool. So if I open this up, you'll notice the rear seats in here fold down, and a fairly large human could actually fit through there. This morning I wanted to start the truck, so I actually folded down the seats and I crawled through there, got the truck started, and warmed things up on the interior. This would also be great, in my opinion, as a dog door. If you just leave this thing open at night, the heat from the actual living portion of this vehicle will kind of funnel through there and heat that up. So you could put a dog bed there and give them their own like kind of personal space. Now moving over here to the wet bath. You have the lighting controls for the bathroom right here. Of course, those are dimmable as well, just like everything else in this vehicle. And it's going to be very hard to show on video, but this thing is absolutely huge. Like I mentioned, you have about 6.5 feet of room here, so that doesn't even change when you get in the shower. The floor is about the same as the rest of the floor in this vehicle. I don't know if I will shower in this with my time spent with it, but it would be very comfortable to do so. We have the shower head over here with the shower controls, a little sink as well. And then down here we have some access to the water panels, which will feed the shower and the sink. We have a toilet paper dispenser here, so when you close that up, you're not going to get your toilet paper all wet while you're showering. Flush button for the toilet. Cassette toilet sits right here. That is a Thetford product, which is something that I actually have experience with an older van that I had. You have a max fan here, which you can pop open to vent out any condensation while you're showering. And then you also have a little bit of storage up here where you could put shampoo, body wash, toothbrush, toothpaste, toiletries, all that good stuff. And you have a big mirror, which the ladies are gonna love. Now let's move further back the vehicle into, I guess, the galley. So for the kitchen, we have a ton of space here. I, of course, am used to my Storyteller van, so having this much space would make cooking an absolute breeze. Right here we have an induction cooktop, 2 of them to be exact. So with those 3,000 watt dual inverters here, you're able to cook basically a full-blown meal. You could use the stovetop counter cover here as a cutting board as well. There's kind of a trough all around, that way if you're getting anything wet here, it's obviously not going to drip onto the floor. In the middle here we have wireless charging, and if you press that down, you have access to some outlets as well as some USB ports. For the windows here, like I mentioned, bug screen will retract down, blackout screen will pull down. And then if you want to get access to the windows, dual pane windows again, like I mentioned, so you have some nice insulation factor there, and you can have these windows open while it's raining. You do want to make sure that when you close a window like this, that it locks into the proper position, because if you do not lock it, air will get in there and it could cause a disaster. Down below the counter here, we have a ton of storage space for basically anything you need. Pots and pans, utensils, cookware. We have some smaller stuff. I would probably use this as kind of like a junk drawer for pens and whatever else I may have. Cards, lighters, flashlights, things of that nature. And we have a full-size trash can here, which is really nice. A little bit of a storage bin behind that. More storage here. We have 4 of these massive drawers, so storage is really no issue when it comes to the HILT. You have a lot of room for kind of customization there. And then finally we have a really nice and pretty large sink. You of course have the hot and cold water coming out of the main faucet, and then you also have a purified drinking faucet here, which is a nice change of pace. I typically do not drink the water out of my van tanks just because I never really have, but with that, I would feel a lot safer filling up at, say, like an RV park, or even filling up with the hose at my own house and then actually drinking the water out of there. So nice touch, I really appreciate that. And then of course we have the aluminum backsplash here, which adds a nice touch. We have a world map on there and a ton of storage around the top. Really nice hidden metal latches all the way around, and you can store things really almost around the entire upper cabinet area of this vehicle. Now right behind the sink and the cooktop, we have everything else you need in a kitchen. So we have a convection and microwave here with all the accessories included, of course. Haven't used that yet. We have what I would consider a fairly large isotherm fridge in here with all sorts of storage, different racks that you can move up and down depending on what you're storing in here. And then just below that, we also have a freezer to match. I'm used to the freezer in my van, which can only basically hold like a couple trays of ice and maybe some ice cream sandwiches, but here you could have full pints of ice cream if you wanted to. And then to the left of that whole setup, we have even more storage, this massive closet here with a little bit of a hanging rod at the top, and then adjustable shelves, which will flip down depending on your needs. And that brings us to the seating area in the dinette. So back here we have a ton of space. You could probably sit about 6 adults fairly comfortably. You have a nice little table here which kind of swivels around and of course stows away underneath the seat here, because this will also convert into a queen size bed. You could sleep 2 adults in the front bed, 2, maybe even 3 adults back here, and of course you have a ton of storage all around. Really, all of these cabinets here. Reading lights underneath. These are very similar to the Storyteller van, so you can set them individually with the mode comm, and you can also press them manually to turn them off. And then we have views all around, a ton of natural light in here. I really like the light wood color choices in here. It just kind of brings the light of the outside inside. Makes it feel a little bit more homey. We have more lighting presets over here on the side of the sink, so if you're sitting in the dinette and you want to change the mood lighting in here, you can do that. Water pump there as well. And then there is a little bit of storage underneath these seats too. I believe the water tank is over on this side. I'm assuming batteries might be over here somewhere, but again, I've only had this truck for about 24 hours and I haven't really picked apart everything. So now let's get into the questions that you guys have about this truck. Maybe I haven't answered all of them yet. So let me get comfortable here and answer some questions for you guys. So first one is coming from Grunt Outdoors 20. How does it drive on the highway? I have been very surprised with how this thing drives and handles. That liquid spring suspension and the zero torsion subframe on here really makes this thing drive kind of like a big, heavier van. The 5500 chassis has a ton of power. There's a lot of features up there which makes it a little bit more suitable for driving where I'm currently at in higher elevations in Colorado. We have a lot of mountain passes. We're of course pulling around a lot of weight, so the truck drives really, really nice. Next one is from Graham Holmes. How practical is it as an overlanding vehicle? This is going to depend on the person that you're asking, and for me, my answer would be, if you look at the kind of definition of overlanding, which is basically vehicle-based travel, and it's more about the actual journey than the destination, I think this vehicle definitely has its place, and after just having time with it for the past 24 hours, I feel like a vehicle like the Hilt has more practicality than I originally thought. When I first looked at a vehicle like this, I was like, man, that thing is big. Where do you take it? How does it actually do off-road? And so far, what I've basically narrowed it down to is something like my Tacoma. That can go basically everywhere I want to go. And then I have my Storyteller van. The van is very hooked up. I did a lot of suspension work and a lot of modifications to make it even better off-road, but it's not quite going to get to the places that the truck will. I would say the truck has the largest margin ahead of the van. And then there's the Hilt. The Hilt, from what I've experienced so far, I think will be very good at overlanding and being off-road. I mean, it's really built to do this kind of stuff. Rugged exterior and then a really nice homey interior. But because of the overall size of this thing, I think the truck will be a little bit more limited than even the van when it comes to getting to different places. That being said, though, you're taking a vehicle like this to places that a large majority of the population never get to see anyway, so you can still get off-grid. I think it is going to be a great overlanding vehicle, but it's going to kind of fit into its own category. So I'm thinking trucks and dedicated off-roaders, and then you have like the van life segment, and then of course the Global X vehicles. Here's a good question which I kind of hit on already. Why the Hilt over other brands? Like I mentioned, this is RVIA certified, which means you can get into this vehicle a lot easier than some of the other competition out there. You can pick it up at a dealership, you can get it serviced at dealerships all across the country, you can get RV financing for like a 20-year long-term loan. So generally a vehicle like this will be upwards of $500,000, and it's very difficult for an average person to get into. But if you're really about the nomadic lifestyle and you want to live on the road, this would be an absolute blast to do it in, and it's going to be a little bit more feasible. So you have the Storyteller build quality, you have a lot of great features and functionality. The suspension alone is just like a huge selling feature in at least my opinion. And then you also have the peace of mind of that certification. So I think this would be a great option over other brands out there, because I can't even think of another expedition vehicle that would be certified the way the Hilt is. Here's one that was asked a lot, miles per gallon. So I actually reset my trip before we came up into the mountains here, and it was a lot of hard Colorado driving. I was seeing roughly, actually let me preface this, the speedo is not correct. I believe the speedo is about 10 miles per hour off, because I don't think that was adjusted. The truck has those 41-inch Continental tires, and because of that, you're actually traveling faster and further than the truck is reading out. So I think it's about 10 miles per hour off, and because of that, the readouts on your miles per gallon is going to be off as well. So under hard Colorado driving up and down mountain passes, and then a little bit of off-roading to get where I'm at right now, I was seeing about 5.5 to 7 miles per gallon, sometimes 8 miles per gallon, but again, those numbers are probably low. Once I fill this thing up with fuel again, I will try to calculate how far I've driven and give you a more accurate number there. It's not great, obviously, it's a big heavy vehicle, but it is diesel powered. It takes 52 gallons of fuel. This prototype actually has another fuel tank up front, so I think it could hold like 75 gallons of fuel. I just filled up the main tank back here, which is how the production units will be, and takes 10 gallons of DEF. I've already put 2 big jugs of DEF in here, and hopefully that will hold me over for all of my testing. So yeah, miles per gallon, I will try to get back to you on a more accurate answer to that. Unseen Miles is asking about realistic departure angles. So I don't know these specs off the top of my head, but I will pop them up on the screen right here. Storyteller has taken a lot of measurements, and they will show you all of the departure angles and the approach angles, all different things like that. Of course, the suspension is adjusting in real time. You can set it high and low, so those numbers are going to vary a little bit depending on what mode you're in. I should also mention that when you are driving above a certain speed, it's going to default to the normal setting, which is like a kind of a mid-height level. When you're off-road and you're going a little bit slower, you can raise it up to the high setting, and then once you cross that speed threshold, it will lower down just for safety reasons. Same thing with the low setting. If you're going low and slow in a parking lot, you can lower the vehicle down. When you're parked at camp, you can lower it down, making it easier to get inside and outside. So all of that stuff is fully adjustable, and there's a lot more specs over on Storyteller's website. Nomad Link Upfitters, important question. How does the factory audio sound? Surprisingly, really good. I don't have much experience with RAM platforms, but the inside of this thing, the limited platform, is very nice. Leather seats up there, you have all the creature comforts, and the audio, I believe, is a Harman Kardon audio system, and it sounds really nice. I don't even think I would upgrade it if I owned one of these for myself. Amy's asking, how does it drive compared to your other truck? So you guys who have watched my channel, you'll know I have a 3rd gen Tacoma, and in the wintertime, like right now, I have a slide-in truck camper in the back there. And to be honest, it drives pretty similar. I have some crazy suspension on my truck, nothing near as crazy as the liquid spring suspension that comes on the Hilt, but the driving characteristics are very similar. Of course, you can feel the weight up a little bit higher, especially above the cab and everything. But my truck, I built that to handle that camper. I thought about getting the camper before I even picked out the truck. And just like I picked my own truck and built it to carry the camper, Storyteller picked this chassis to haul around this capsule back here. And the driving characteristics are pretty similar. This is obviously a whole entire different world. And like I mentioned, I've talked about like kind of a garage layout in the past, truck, van, car. I think something like the Hilt would really fit into place. It wouldn't replace my van, it wouldn't replace my truck, even my truck with the slide-in camper, but it does a lot of its own things in a very different way. So I think I could expand the garage and definitely really put a vehicle like this to use. It would be very different, it would be a learning curve, but it would be rad. This thing wouldn't completely replace my truck, but it would be an awesome addition. And now for the main question, which everyone asks, of course, when you see a vehicle like this: how much does that thing cost? When they originally debuted the Hilt, there was some early bird pricing, and you could actually pick up a Hilt like this for under $400,000. There is current see-through pricing, just like the vans, at about $446,000. Now, that is a large pill to swallow, obviously, but it is see-through pricing. So unlike some other RV manufacturers out there, if you buy a specific type of travel trailer from one dealership, the pricing might be marked up or even might be a little bit cheaper than, say, another dealership. Storyteller Overland uses see-through pricing, which means what you see is what you get no matter where you're making the purchase of a vehicle like this. Same thing goes for all of their vans, the LTs that they've sold, all of their Storyteller lineup right now with the classic mode, the stealth, the beast, and all the different other variants out there. It is see-through pricing, which is a nice peace of mind. You have that certification, so big price tag, but when you look at everything that you're getting with that certification, all of the features, the suspension, the chassis of the truck, and then you compare it to some other competitors out there, I think this might actually be one of the best options on the market right now. So there you guys have my initial impressions with the new Storyteller Overland GXV Hilt. Again, if you have any questions, drop them down below, and I'm going to try to use my time as wisely as possible with this thing to really test it out, give you guys kind of a first-hand feel of what it's like living with a vehicle like this, the functionality with it, where I can take it, and basically anything else you guys want to see. If you have any pressing questions right now, again, I will leave the link for the Hilt in the description down below. Over on Storyteller Overland's website, you can find basically everything you want to know about this thing. You can make a reservation for one if you already think that this is something right up your alley. And stay tuned for some more Hilt content here on the channel and of course over on Instagram. That is all that I had for today. If you guys are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe because I make new videos every single week. As always, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.